Hey guys, so welcome back to our tutorials. In today's tutorial, we're going to talk about how can you create this blog card using HTML, CSS. So let's get started. So to get started, as always, we have a blank CSS file and we have a blank HTML, which has just the boilerplate. So we just first need to link the CSS with this document. So we write link CSS, and then you make sure if you are using a different style file name, you change that. So for instance, I'm using style.css, which corresponds to my style.css. So the next thing before we start coding is that we can go to our CSS file. And what we want to do now is to add the default CSS styles. So the margin of 0, padding of 0, and a box sizing of border box, right? These are the default CSS styles. Also, let's style the body. And there are two fonts that we might need. We'll need two fonts. One of it is called DM Sans. So to get these fonts, you just go to fonts.google.com. One of the fonts we want is called DM Sans. This is the font we want. And then on the bottom, you'll see a button that says Get Font. So you click Get Font, get embed code. So you can see I have two fonts. So go ahead and do the same for this font called Playfair. And then here on the bottom, click on the import. And then paste this import in our CSS file like that. And then in the body, let's specify the font family. So we can say font family. So we are going to have the body as DM sans. So then as a fallback, sans serif. The fallback is used in case you're not able to reach these Google fonts. All right, so that's it. And also for the text color, I have a text color. So the text color we are going to use as text variable, which is #55. This is the color we are going to use. So this is the text color we are going to use. I've just created it as a CSS variable. All right, so the next thing you might need is this image. So if you need the exact image I'm using, you can always go to my GitHub repository. So my username is TechWithTwin / then the repository name is TikTok projects. Look for the blog v3. Click on the blog v3, and then the thumbnail is the image that I do have. You can see it there. So that's sorted. So the next thing, let's go back and now create the blog card. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to create a div with a class of blog, because this is a single blog card. And then inside, I'm going to create a wrapper. We always say that you don't want to style the image directly. You want to style the div wrapping the image to prevent issues. So I'm going to create an image wrapper div. This one will hold my image. And then since I don't have that image here, I'm going to drag it from my folders. And then since I have it, then we can go ahead and use it as thumb.jpg, and the placeholder, the alt, we can say placeholder image. All right, so that's done for the image. If you go live now, I showed you how you can go live using the live server extension. You can see now we get the image, but it is too huge. So we're just going to specify the width we want here in the image tag. So you want a smaller image, and you can see it there. So let's continue. The next thing we might need is this tagline. So we just create a P with a class of tag, paragraph tag, and it starts with in. And then let's create a span, because you can see now the lifestyle has a different font color. No, the text color. So, and then this one is lifestyle. So we are done on that. Next, let's go to the heading. So the heading, we are going to use a heading level 3. So heading level 3, and then it says older cars. So then you can see the never has some different styles. So we can use a span here and say never. and then out of style. We are done with the heading. Now let's move to the next section, which is this details. So I'm just going to create a div and call it details. And then we have 3 paragraph tags. The first one holds the date. So we can say May 14, 20. So this is the date that the blog was created. You can write any day you want. Let me use May 14, 2025. And then you can see we have a dash. I'm going to place it inside a paragraph as well. So I'm just going to say paragraph and then put the dash there. And then the next one will be the comments. So you just use a p tag and then say 3 and then comments. Alternatively, you can give this comment a span and then now style that using CSS. But for my case, I'm not going to do that. The next thing, let's create the description. So p.excerpt. And the excerpt, you just copy this excerpt and paste it there. All right, so after the excerpt, then finally we only have the button. So you just say button, and then the button says continue reading. And we are done with our HTML, and you can see now everything is here. So the next thing is to go to the CSS. Let's now try to place this card in the middle, but first let's give it a width. So we can say dot blog. In the width, let's do something like 400 pixels. You can see now it has capped the width. And then we go back to the body and say display flex, and then justify content to the center. Now the content is the center. The next thing might realize is the content is too close to the edges. So we can give some padding to the body and say padding to rem. And then that looks nice. So now let's continue. So we want to give some, you want to place this element flex, but in a column, but also so that we can be able to add some gaps between these elements. So we are going to say display flex there, and then justify content to the center. So this one will place everything to the center, but we also need to say the flex direction is column. So you can see now that it is trying to place everything in the center. So we need to now, instead of, we need to align, because now we are using the column. Now everything is centered. And then we also need to do text align center. So that's why you see this text is justified to the start. We need to align it to the center, just like that. Now it looks a bit nice. So we are done with that. The next thing we need to style is all the paragraph tags. So we capture every paragraph tag and say font size. Let's use 0.85 rem. And then a color, we have the text color defined there is a variable, which is text color. And then now you can see the text starts to behave. All right. Also here we displayed, but we did not give some gap. Let's do a gap of 0.4 rem. All right. So that looks a bit nice. So let's now tackle this image. So we have the image wrapper. Let's give it some height. So we can say image wrapper, and the height is 16 rem. So let's reduce the height. We can say maybe 14. I think 14 will be okay. And then now we grab the image inside the image wrapper and say width 100% and a height of 100% and object fit cover. So what happens if the image is too small or the image is too big? You want it to be covered so that they can maintain its aspect ratio, and then you can see it there. So we are done with that. And then the next thing we need to handle is this text. This text has a different font. So the font we imported that is called Prefair is what we are going to give this heading. You can say font family Prefair. And then as a fallback, we add sans serif. Right, you can see it. It has worked out. So the next thing is that in our heading, we added a span to the never. So we can grab that. So we can say heading level 3 span. The font weight, let's increase the font weight to 800. And the font style. So the font style, font style is italic. All right, you can see it. The next thing, let's increase the size of this element. So we can say font size 1.7 rem. All right, so now you can see it. And then let's reduce the font weight of the other element text other than the span. So we can say font weight 400. All right, you can see it now. It looks a bit nice as a heading. All right, so the next thing is that we need to get the tagline. So the tagline is what has the in lifestyle. So this is the tagline. It has the in lifestyle. So we can just grab the tagline by the tag. And then font style. Let's do italic for everything. You can see now it gets italic. But now the span has a normal style. So we can say the tag span. First, let's change the color to red. And then let's say font style. All right, and we are done with that. And now next thing, let's tackle the details. So to tackle the details, you have the details and then display flex on the details. Now you can see now these two are side by side. Let's give a gap to make sure that there's some breathing room between these three elements. We can say a gap of 0.4 rem. Fantastic. So that looks nice. All right. So now let's grab the excerpt. You can see it is quite bolded than the final version. So what we can do is that we can unbold it. So we can say dot excerpt font weight. Let's do 300. And then now that looks nicer. Then let's grab the button. So to style the button, let's go back here and start to reference the button. So what we can do now is grab the button. And then let's add some padding. So we can add a padding of 8 pixels, 12 pixels. So the 8 pixels corresponds to the vertical padding. The 12 pixels is the horizontal padding. And if you wanted to add individual sides, you start with the top, right, bottom, left. So you can add 4 of them. But this is a shorthand for when the top and bottom are equal and the left and right are equal as well. So the next thing you might want to do now on the button. So let's go to the finished version. You can see that. Let's save this. So you can see that now the continue reading is visible. So the next thing, let's add some border radius. So you can say border radius of 5 pixels. So you can see it, and then let's change the border. So you can say border, you can say 1 pixels or 0.7 pixels. Sorry, and then let's use the text color. All right, and then let's make the background transparent. So you can say background color transparent. All right, and then finally, let's go to the image wrapper and give it a background color and see background color red. So it is working as we expect. So what else we need to work on? The button looks nice. Let's give it a color of the text color. So we can say color, text color. So the color should be the text color. And that's it, guys. That's how you can create such a card. Make sure you like, follow, and share with your friends. And let's see you next. So thank you.